Hey, what's up coders, welcome back to my channel. In this video I'll be talking about dismissible widget. Now to talk about this widget, it's a simple swipe and dismiss widget. So it follows the pattern where whatever container or a card or image or a list item that you've selected, you could actually swipe either to the left or right, and there's some kind of action performed on this item. So keeping this point in mind, I've come up with a UI which is a simple to-do list, and I have all these list items, and all I could do is either I could swipe on the left or right, and there's some kind of action being performed on these items. So before I start with the demonstration, I would like to point out that there is a library that's available, or a plugin that does a similar kind of a job. But just to mention that I have not used a plugin in my demo video. It's purely the logic and the code that I've used to achieve this functionality. So, but definitely we'll have a look into the library. If you want to use it, you can definitely try it. It's a very beautiful plugin. So just to give you a glance of it, so this is what the plugin is. It's called the Flutter Slideable. And yeah, so you could slide the item either on the left or right, and you have few icons popping up and you can click and there's some kind of action happening. But the dismissible widget that I have used is slightly similar to this, but it's not exactly the same functionality. So it's just swipe and there's some kind of action happening. But to mention, there is also a couple of another interesting features that I've added. So let's look into the emulator and see what are those. So if you look at this demo page, it's a simple to-do list page where you have the list items. So the first thing is that I've used a different bottom bar, where not the usual one where you have this floating action button in the center, which is center docked, and to add new list. And this is a kind of a list view, so where you could actually scroll, and I've given some kind of tags to it, so it actually indicates what's the level or priority of these tasks. And you could see that there is this colored container, and you have this entire list item overlapping or stacked on it. So that's also a very cool design that I've found these days, where they're using in your apps. And if you click on this floating button, you would be able to add a new task, select the priority and the time, and when you click on add, you will find the task getting added. So let me show you a small demo of it. So all I'm doing is just adding a text, and I'm clicking on the color yellow with the task time, say 10 o'clock, and then I'm clicking on add, and if you see, the task gets added with the same indicator color that I've chosen while I'm creating a new task. So it's a very simple but definitely an interesting UI, I would say. And also here I've used the dismissible widget. So to talk about the dismissible widget, say for example you have this one, so I can either swipe on the left or on the right. So that's the interesting part about the dismissible widget that I have used here. So if I do towards the right, it's gonna delete my item, so I don't have to click on the item to delete. So by swiping on the right, it's gonna delete it. So you can see here it also displays a snack bar stating that it's been deleted. And if I do left swipe, it's gonna archive it. So it's automatically doing my task without even clicking on the icons. So that's the speciality of this dismissible widget. So if you want, I'll show you the demo again. So if I swipe on the right, it's going to delete it, and that's what I've indicated here by showing you a trash icon. And if I swipe on the right, it's going to archive it, and that's what you can see on the bottom with the pop-up. So we will start with the implementation. So I'll clear the template. Alright, so to start up with the implementation, first let's start with the structure of the page, and then let's move on with the implementation. So first let's build the screen and then add this colored container and this white container which overlaps over the colored container and overlaps or stack, I would say, and then the floating button, and then we'll move on with this list view implementation. So first let's create the containers and then add the component inside the containers. So to start up with the colored container, okay, before that let me explain you a few more things about the task which is getting added up. So I've created a simple Dart file task which has 4 parameters. One is the name, this is the name of the task, the subtask, the time, and these colors. These are basically the priority of your task. So I've created a simple constructor using those properties, and then I have created the same list with the task, and inside this I've added this. So this is not only the only approach, you can definitely use a different approach, but I've just kept it very simple for the demonstration purpose. Then, so moving on to this, I do not have an app bar in this page. If you definitely want to add one, you can add it. So here all I've done is I've started my container with the width, the entire width of the screen, and the height of the screen. Then I've started with the stack widget. So inside my stack widget, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 position widgets, so that the first one occupies the colored component and the second one is your white component. So for that I'm going to use a position and then it's a container. So let me quickly get the code for the container and then I'll let you know what I've done here. So first one is a position widget. I've not given any position because it's going to be, there is no specific position, so I've not given the positions of it. So it's going to be, the width is the entire screen, the height is by 3 because I wanted a certain height of this container. Then I've used a box decoration with a particular gradient so that I can get this gradient effect. So if you want more details about how to add gradient, I've done a separate video about it, and I'm going to leave a link in the description so you can definitely view the videos related to the gradient. And then I've added a child which is my header content. So this content, whatever you see here, is being placed inside another widget because I didn't want to add all the details in the same widget. So if you see what this widget does is, it's a simple list style with a text, and the title is also a text and a subtitle with a text and with some color I've given. So that's it. This is a simple header content. Then, so I'm going to build this, and you can see the first part appearing on the UI. Alright, there you go. So you can see here the first component, which is the gradient container, and now we will focus on the bottom bar, and then we will add the overlapping list view. Alright, now moving on to the floating action button. You know how to create a simple floating action button. So all you have to do is at the end of your body section, you have to add a floating action button, give a background and a foreground color with the on pressed, which is very important, and a child icon representing the symbol inside the circle. So when you build this, you get this floating button. But when you look at the demo page, the icon is situated in the center, and you have another tab which is kind of the floating button is center docked inside that particular bottom bar. So we're going to create that. So for that, what you have to do is, first thing, you have to use a floating action button location. So it's called float, and then use the same thing, and you're going to mention the location of it. So I'm going to say it's going to be center dock. So that's the first point. Next we're going to add the bottom navigation bar. So for that, it's going to be bottom navigation bar, and use the bottom app bar. Okay, and then inside the bottom app bar, I'm going to give a color factor. Okay, before child, I need to give a color factor, and I have used a custom color, so I'm just going to use that. And then I have defined a shape for it, which is nothing but circular notch rectangle. That's when your floating button can be center docked or placed properly when it is in the center. So that's called circular notched rectangle. Okay, and then you have the child to be defined. So the child that I'm defining here is that if you look at the demo UI, you have two menu items. So all I have to do is just define two icons in the row. So with axis, main axis element, space around it. So I'm going to quickly get the code related to that, because we've done several times in most of my videos, so you must be having an idea how to add a row. So here I've given a max axis size max, and the alignment is space around it, and then I have added two icon buttons, but at the moment I've not added any functionality to it, so it's purely just an icon to be displayed. So when I do a hot restart, so there you go. So now you can see that the floating button appears in the center, and by giving that shape of circular notch rectangle, you get that effect, and your two icons on each side of the bottom bar. So this is how you achieve it. Now moving on to the list item, which is like stacked over this first item. So let's move on to the stack part. Okay, this is the stack, and this is your first position item. So next you have to define another position. Okay, let's add this position. Let's add a child, and let's enclose the container and the position. Okay, so inside the child would basically be the list view builder. So in my case, I have used the list view builder, so I'll show you how to implement it. So it's simple. I've created a position widget, which is at the position top 160 and left 18, so that I get it in the center of this section with the color white, the width and the height parameters, and the child of this particular position widget or this container would be a list view. So now I'm going to define the list view here. So what I've done is I've used list view builder, so it's pretty straightforward. Okay, now inside this I have defined few parameters. The first one is your item count, and this item count is going to take the count of your list. So in my case, it's going to be the task. So all I have to do is tasks dot length. So this gets the length of the list, and then inside the item builder I have to use two parameters. One is the context, and then the other one is the position. Okay, now here comes the dismissible widget. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enclose all my list item inside the dismissible widget, so that when I swipe I would get that effect. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a return, and then use this dismissible widget. So let's see, there you go. Okay, and this widget has couple of properties like key and the child. So inside the child we are going to add the list item container UI. So at the moment we're going to add the key. The key is going to be the position to string. So it's going to take a string value, but if I say the task position, it's going to be a hint. So that's the reason we are assigning it a string. And then I'm going to add a couple of more properties to it before the child. Okay, first let me add the child component. Alright, so to talk about this dismissible, there are a couple of properties. As I mentioned, key, child, background, and on dismissed. They are very important in order to get that dismissible effect. So in the key, what I've done is I've added the position. In the background is when I swipe either left or right, the background, whatever you want to appear, either it could be a colored background or you want some icons, that has to be defined here. So for that, what I've done is I've used a separate widget so that I can actually show that recycle or the trash can or the archive icon. So that is defined in this, which I'll be discussing in a couple of seconds. And this is my list container. So this is what my list container with the stripe and the details. So I'll show you both of these containers. So all it has is the task name, the subtask, the task time, and the status. So moving on to my list container. So it's pretty straightforward. It's a container with the material effect, and I've used row widget so that I can add the containers in the row fashion. So you can see that this is one section, the indicator is one section, the content is one section, and this content is one section. So I've used the row widget here. So you can see here. So the first thing is that I have used a container with the height and width, and the color is the task color. So this is what gives me the indicators on my list item. So then next I've used an expanded widget so that my container gets expanded and the task details occupies most of my list item size, and only the rest is being occupied by the time and the color indicators. So that's the reason I've enclosed it inside expanded widget, and I've added the two containers, which is the task name and the subtask. So there are two containers inside a column widget. And then my last container is nothing but it's used alignment center right, and this container contains the task time. So all I've done is I've separated this entire task into three sections in row. First one is the indicator, and this one is the task details, and this is the task time. Alright, so that was about your task. Now moving on to your background, which is the hidden container. That is when you swipe left or right, you get those icons. So that is what I've defined here. So here what I've done is I have used a container and I've used a row widget, and inside this row widget I've used icon buttons basically. So one I have placed, I've used your alignment because I think I'll show you the demo. We can see the why I have used alignment center left and center right. So alright, so if you look at the demo, if I swipe towards my right, I'm not placing the recycle somewhere in the center. I'm placing it exactly at the center left so that it appears in the first position. And similar way, if you look at the other side of it, I have placed the archive on my center right. It's not somewhere on the center or top center or bottom center, so that it appears in the corner of this list item. So that's the reason I've used align widget. So I will also add a link about my align widget, how to use it. So I've done a separate video on it, so you'll find the link in the description. So all I've done is I've used a container, and this entire container color is same as your task color. So that's also another thing to be observed. So if you look here, whatever the color of my list item indicator is, it's the same color that gets reflected here. So the same goes with the red, the same goes with the green. So that's the reason I've enclosed this inside a container and given a color same as this task color. Then I've used a row and then align widgets, two align widgets. So at the moment we are not clicking on the icon, only it's going to detect our swipe direction, whether if it's right or left, and depending on that it actually performs the action. Now let's see what happens or how to check if you are swiping on the left or right. So for that we are going to use in the dismissible widget, there is another parameter that we have to define, which is called on dismissed. Okay, here you go. So what I'm doing is on dismissed we have a direction factor. So with that I'm going to say if the direction is equals to start to end. So this is considered to be the start position. So from start to end is this side, swiping towards the right, and the other one is end to start. So in that case, what I've done is, so if my direction is start to end, then I have created a snack bar with the text delete, and then I'm saying that to remove that particular item from my task. So it's a simple list operation that I'm performing. That's it. So all I'm doing is just remove it. So similar way, if I'm swiping from my right to left, all I'm doing is, that is the archiving part. At the moment, I'm just using a snack bar, but definitely you can add a functionality like your favorites and add it to the archive or store them in a particular folder. So you could do that. So this is another interesting part about the dismiss is you don't have to click on the icon to perform this. For delete and left is for archive. So this is about adding the list item. Now the last part is when I click on this floating action button, I get is a simple pop-up, which is the alert dialog. So we will quickly add that, and yeah, we'll see the implementation part as well. Alright, so moving on to the adding a new task part. So when I click on this floating button, I get a pop-up which is nothing but a simple show dialog with the alert dialog inside it, which I've covered in a couple of my videos. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same functionality with it inside it. So I'm just going to quickly walk through that particular code. So on clicking of my floating action button, I'm going to start a dialog, and then I have added these text editing controller. It's because we are using a text field inside it. So for that, I'm using this text editing controller. So I have, for individual text editor, I have a particular variable and the task color. So I have my alert dialog open with a new task, and this is nothing but a container with a height 250. So let me quickly build this so that I can show you how it looks, and then I can walk through the code simultaneously. Alright, so if you look at the alert dialog, it has a new task title. With the task title, these three are the text field and these are colors, which is nothing but small containers with a particular height and width and a color to the container placed in a row fashion. That's it. And a button to add your item. Now this is pretty straightforward, where you have text fields, and for the text fields I've added a controller. So all I have is 3 text fields. So this is the first one, which is for your first task value, you could see, and this is another container, and this one is the row of colors or the priorities that you would like to select while creating a task. So it's a pretty straightforward container with a width and height factor and a gesture detector surrounded by it, so that on tap of these colors you can actually capture the color of the task. And then you have the simple button here, which is the raised button, and this is the text field to capture the time that you could see here, the task time. And I've kept it very simple. Definitely you can add the number slider, or you can add the drop down, adding a new task option, but I have just kept it very simple. Now the main concentration comes on the add part, so that it captures all these details, and when you click on add, it pushes back to the list item so that it gets displayed in your main page. So that's what we're going to see. So it's a raised button that I've used with a particular color and the text. Now this is where the add function comes. So on pressed, what I'm doing is I'm adding all the values that's from my text field. Whatever values that I'm getting, I'm creating a new task and adding it to the existing one. So this way it gets added to the list, and it's been surrounded by set state. And then I use navigator pop context so that my alert closes and my main screen opens. So this is how you implement a simple to-do list app and use the dismissible widget, so that you could either swipe right or swipe left depending on your use case. And instead of delete or archive, you can definitely use different other functionalities also, and also create this kind of a pattern with the bottom bar and overlapping or stacking of these widgets, and also adding a new task so that it can add to the existing task list, and you can delete it also. So yeah, that's it for this video, and I hope you like it. If you do, please give it a like and do subscribe, and if you find this informative, please do share it. Thank you.